Hi, this is Mr. Den, and you'll watch this screencast of the PowerPoint on creation of the Constitution to prepare for for the week two's work. So, we're going to talk about the Just Right Constitution. So, initially following the breakaway from Great Britain, we wanted a government that first of all, has enough power to do its job, but didn't give anyone too much power because we didn't want another king like King George. Considered the needs of all of the 13 colonies that were now states so that people in those states had a say, and it also protected the rights of the individual. So following the Declaration of Independence and our breakaway from Great Britain, the Americans wrote their first plan called the Articles of Confederation. And in that plan, a confederation is just I call it a group hug. It's a group of states or individuals that get together and unite for a common purpose, and that was to protect or provide that organization that they needed so that they could be successful as a country. Now, the positive parts about this was that each state was independent and had its own government. So each state, of course, had its state government, and those states would then send representatives to a Congress. And the Congress is the only central government that America had at the very beginning, and there was no president. And then in Congress, each state got one vote. So no matter how big or small those states were, they all got one vote. And it sounded great because states got to keep their power and got to keep their independence, and nobody could tell them what to do. So there was no central government other than this confederation where each state had one vote that could tell the other states what to do. So Congress had power, but not very much. They could create a military to protect all their states. But there were some problems with that, and those problems included that Congress could call a military, but it had no way to enforce the laws that it passed, if they could pass it, because it took 9 of the 13 states to pass a law. They also couldn't collect any taxes, and if you can't collect taxes, how do you create an army? And then the articles could only be changed if the states agreed to it, and it took all the states to change the articles. So it was virtually impossible to change the articles. So think about that. Every state had ultimate power. If one state said, no, I don't want to change it, it couldn't be changed. So it was very problematic. So let's just quickly review this. Under the Articles of Confederation, the president would lead the country is false because there was no president under the Articles. And then under the Articles, states would be independent. That's pretty true. And then the Articles of Confederation would not be easy to change because it took every state to vote to change it. And then if you had a bigger state that had a lot of people, like, say, Virginia or New York, would they have more power in Congress? The answer to that question is no. They didn't, because every state had one vote. And then, did they have the power to tax? No. The way that this says it is, under the Articles, Congress did not have the power to collect taxes. That's true. They could not tax. And if the Congress could pass laws and force the states to follow them, is false because there was no way to force them to do it. But it was our first government, even as weak as it was. So, did everybody think that the central government should have more power? No, not everyone did. So that was false. And some people were afraid states might lose their independence. That's true. Different states had different needs. That's true. States all got along with each other. That was false. They didn't, and that's why this problem existed. The government created by the Articles had everything under control among the states? No. And we know that's true because when Shays' Rebellion happened, which was a rebellion of farmers and small business people in Massachusetts that were being foreclosed on, an ex-revolutionary officer named Daniel Shays led a revolution and overtook a courthouse. And if that was possible underneath these small rebellions, that made other states very, very nervous. And so that was kind of the indicator that something new had to happen. So, what was this new idea? The Article of Confederations only had Congress that made the laws. There was no president, and there was no court system. The new idea was to have three branches, and that's called, the idea of that is the separation of powers and the checks and balances. And this was something that James Madison came up with. And Madison, of course, was called the father of our Constitution. So we want to remember that James Madison was the guy who really was the architect of our Constitution. So the big states that had large populations thought that there should be votes for the states depending upon population. So if you had a lot of people, you had more votes. And if you had a smaller population, you had less votes in Congress. And that way larger states or larger population states would have more power. That was the Virginia plan. The New Jersey plan said that legislative branches should have one where each state got one vote. That's kind of back like the Articles of Confederation. And that way smaller states would have, well, I don't know if it was more power, but equal power. And that means that the individuals in that state had more power than those larger states in population, people who live there. So, of course, Virginia was a big state and New Jersey was a small state, so it's no surprise that that's how it was. Now, the compromise to that plan was called the Great Compromise, and it was created by Connecticut. And it doesn't say that on the slide, but you need to remember that. The Great Compromise, or the Connecticut Compromise, proposed by Connecticut was that you'd have the three branches of government. Congress would have two houses, the House and the Senate. The Senate got 2 votes per state, regardless of the population, so small states were happy about that. And in the House of Representatives, that was based on population. So that was the compromise. So let's talk about the solution again. Articles required the states to treat citizens of other states the same as their own citizens. That's false. The Articles didn't require that, but the Constitution did. So there was a requirement that under the Constitution, you had to treat citizens of other states the same way you treated citizens of your state. So the Constitution requires each state to treat citizens of other states the same as it treats its own citizens. How many states had to agree in order for the Articles to be changed? All the states had to agree. So that's why when the founders of our country got together to talk about what to do, they realized that the Articles of Confederation was going to have to be scrapped. They were going to have to start over. And that's how the Constitution came to be. The Constitution can be changed only if 2/3 of the members of Congress and 3/4 of the state agree. 2/3 of Congress have to vote to consider ratification of an amendment. And 3/4 of the states, once that amendment passes 2/3 in the House and Senate, then it has to go to 3/4 of all the states to agree. So it's very difficult to change the Constitution. The Articles of Confederation required states to follow the laws Congress passed. That's false. So the Constitution says that the laws passed by Congress are superior to the laws passed by the states. So if you give the federal Constitution or the national government the power to make laws, you're also giving Congress, that national government, the power that's superior or stronger than the power of the states. So if the national government passes a law and it's underneath the power of the Constitution, the states have to follow that. Okay? And that's called the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause is that the national government is superior to the state government. Under the Constitution, laws made by the legislative branch are superior to the state. Under the Constitution, laws passed by Congress are superior to state laws. Under the Constitution, Congress has 2 chambers, the House and the Senate. Under the Constitution, each state gets 2 votes in the Senate. And under the Constitution, the number of votes each state gets in the House is based on its population. Under the Constitution, a change to the Constitution must be approved by 3/4 of the states, which is still very difficult. So if we compare the Articles against the Constitution, I want you to create a Venn diagram, and it's going to say this in the Prezi, And you're going to go through this PowerPoint and click on whether or not each statement applies to the articles and make a slide on a PowerPoint, and that's what you're going to upload for the first station for week 2. So, decide whether each statement applies to the articles, the Constitution, or both. So A, created a president, was just the Constitution. Okay? B, under the articles or under the Constitution or both, is there created a government? And we know it was both. C, decide whether each statement applies to the articles, the Constitution, or both, had one branch of government. Well, that was just the articles because we know that there were 3 branches of government under the Constitution. So that was, C would be articles. D had enough power to do its job. The articles didn't have very much power, but the Constitution did, so that's D. E created a court system. There wasn't a court system under the articles, but there was under the Constitution. So that goes underneath the Constitution, E, under the Constitution. F gave large and small states the same power. Well, we know that under the Constitution, it was a large in the articles. Let's go back. Sorry, the articles gave large states, small states the same power. The Constitution did not. So that's under F. Created a Congress. That was both. Both of those governments, the articles and the Constitution, had Congress. The compromise between large and small states happened under the Constitution, where the Senate had 2 votes per state and the House had based on population. So that's the Constitution. And the military was both, but it was hard to do because the articles couldn't tax. So even though you could make a military, it was hard to get one. And the articles couldn't enforce its laws. So that's J underneath that one. So there's your Venn diagram. Make sure you complete that. Make a slide of your own and put that in there for Station 1 for Prezi in Week 2. Thank you.